Well, I'm here with Alan Minster of Frontline Advisors. Alan, you have had tremendous success helping businesses achieve remarkable results with their bottom line. And part of that is through sales processes. And what can you tell me about why it's important to have a well-defined sales process? Why is that important?
Well, you know, Steve, working with companies, both large and small, over the course of the last 20 years, we have found that most companies have processes in place for every aspect of the business day, from how payroll gets made to who takes out the trash at night.
Yeah.
But when it comes to sales, almost everything is random. Prospecting is random, client contact is random, cross-marketing is random, so customers say things like, gee, I didn't know you guys sold that.
Yeah.
And a tremendous amount of loss. I am absolutely convinced that you could get wealthy in most companies from just revenue that's slipping through the cracks.
Yeah.
Nobody meant to. You just get busy doing it. So the three reasons that I have really defined to have a defined sales process, a formalized sales process that you have engineered, and that management has engineered in cooperation with their sales team, is that first of all, I used to think that the biggest expense in companies was things like heat, lights, phone, direct and indirect employee expenses.
Right.
But the biggest expense really is missed opportunity. It's that opportunities, that sales deal that you don't get because your salespeople aren't even in the game. You open up the Business Journal on Friday morning and you see a huge opportunity that went to a competitor and your guys didn't even know about it.
Yeah. And that's the one that you find out about. That's the missed opportunity. You know, what about all the ones you never find out about?
And what I try to do is with our customers is put it into perspective. Let's say, for instance, you have a good customer and your average customer is spending, say, $1,000 a month with you. And you expect to keep that customer for a minimum of 5 years.
All right.
Well, I'm no math major, but if you miss that opportunity, that is a $60,000 loss.
Wow.
That doesn't have to happen very many times a year to amount to a substantial amount of revenue loss. And it's just simply the deal you don't get. Now, if that happens not only once or twice a year, but 6, 7, 8, 10 times a year, and that happens because people don't have a formal process for how do we go to market. The second problem that happens out of that is what I alluded to earlier, is if you don't have a systematic approach to automatically and persistently tell your existing customer base about all the products and services you sell.
Right.
They say things like, gee, I didn't know you guys sold that. What that means is they may be buying from competitors, loyal customers, not because they wouldn't give you the business, they just don't know you do.
They just didn't know. They didn't know your whole story, is
That's
what
right.
you're saying.
And believe it or not, it's not our customer's job to know what we sell.
Right, right.
And the third thing, if those two were not bad enough, is it is almost impossible to implement best practices if you do something different every single time.
Right.
If you have 10 salespeople or one salesperson, and every one of those people is doing something different on every single opportunity, even when it works, you don't know. It's almost like it was alchemy. It magically, mystically happened to work out. But that's not how it goes. It's a process from a prospect to going from being a suspect to a prospect to an existing customer. And if you can define what those steps are and you can manage that process, then you can build a sales team that is A, effective, B, cost effective, and gives you the opportunity to completely cover your territory. That's what we call 100% market saturation. Now you can't have 100% market share, but that means if you have defined that someone in your territory is qualified to buy what you sell, they need to be hearing from you on a consistent basis.
Yes.
The other thing that's problematic as well is companies invest a lot of money on advertising and demand generation. But over 70% of the time, even when a prospect contacts you, they're not sales ready. They may be doing due diligence, they may be curious, they may be mildly dissatisfied with their existing vendor, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're ready to go through the pain of change.
Right.
Fewer than 20% of companies have a formalized process for staying in touch with those people, and most sales are made after 8th to 10th contact. Most salespeople quit after 1 or 2. Steve, they have to. They don't have the time to keep going back and going back and going back to prospects who are qualified but are not really ready to make the change. So if you do not have a process, You spend all this money to generate a lead.
Yep.
You slide it across the desk to your salespeople. They make 1 or 2 calls, and they drop off the end.
Right.
So all that money that you invested,
It goes nowhere.
it's wasted.
That's terrible.
It is, and also it causes problems between sales and marketing, because marketing goes through all these efforts to generate a lead. They hand it to their sales team. Their sales team makes 1 or 2 calls, not having the expectation that it's going to take 8 or 10 contacts. And they say, these leads we get from marketing are no good.
They stink, yeah.
They stink. And marketing saying, hey, these salespeople never follow up on the leads. So you get this battering of heads between sales and marketing.
So the organization kind of has this bad blood going on, which...
Misalignment's what we call it. And if you're going to align those two, there has to be a handoff process. Marketing generates the lead. Sales determines where they are in the sales process, in their buying cycle. If they're ready to engage and they're sales ready, salespeople do what they need to do, and that takes a skill set. If they're not ready, sales ready, they hand them back to marketing for that ongoing nurture that I call drip irrigation, which means you're there and you're there and you're there and you're there, because you cannot drive a prospect's ability or willingness to change. For instance, we work a lot with the banking community, commercial lending community.
Right, right.
People only change banks when 1 of 3 or 4 things happen. Either they're mad, or they've outgrown their bank, they want to build a $10 million building and their community bank has a $5 million legal lending limit. They're finding another bank, or there's been a succession and whatever the old guy did, the new guy's not doing, or they've got a new management team. All of those are completely outside of any influence that the loan officer has. And no matter how many times you take them to the ball game, take them to lunch, it doesn't matter until one of those things happen. That's why a process has to be in place.
You know, here's what I find interesting. You may not know this about me, but I have a background in metals manufacturing. And so when I have imagery go off in my mind, I think of the manufacturing floor a lot of times.
Yes.
And it's pretty easy to imagine what would happen if you had a random manufacturing process. Things are just going to be wasted, they're not going to be done well, and that's pretty easy to understand. And you would see the results of that mess pretty readily.
Yes.
What you're saying is that by not having a process related to sales and nurturing, there's a huge mess that's being created that you don't even know about, and it's a real expensive mess.
It's a really expensive mess. And the thing that happens is it not only makes your salespeople less effective. If you have 4 or 5 salespeople and without a process, you have 4 or 5 brands going to market.
Yes.
That may or may not represent management's true decision of what their brand is. So when we sit down with our customers, we help them answer 4 questions. First of all, who is the target? Who specifically buys what you sell? Secondly, what is the message? Why should this person hire you rather than the last guy that was in the door? How frequently do you need to contact that market segment to build top of the mind awareness? And what is the methodology that you're going to use to ongoingly stay in contact? Are you going to email them? Are you going to send them a voicemail? Are you going to send them a letter, a post? What does that look like? And by actually laying that out, flow charting that out, you do the same thing that your manufacturers do when they go ISO 9000, 9002, where there's 6 Sigma certification, where they actually are forced to sit down and say, these are the steps that happen. Because if you don't, you turn out junk.
Right, right.
And quality has a real problem with that.
Boy, that makes so much sense. Alan, thank you for sharing with us today.
You're welcome.
In another conversation, we want to explore how you engineer a sales process.
Where the rubber meets the road.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Great. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.